So my name is Jeffrey Rance. I'm one of the local organizers here of the Trend Micro User Group. I want to welcome you to our second Trend Micro User Group. Again, these always start out small, eventually they'll grow. Our first one, we covered cloud app security, installation, best practices, configuration, that type of situation. For this meeting, we're going to cover XDR, which cloud app security is a part and parcel of. It's the gives you that email capability. CAS gives you the email capability to view into what's going on inside your environment. And so for this discussion, we're going to have Mike Drager lead the talks today. And he's going to be covering, again, XDR, cross-site detection response, and how it interacts within your environment, the pieces that make it up, high-level overview of how to get it set up in your environment, and any gotchas, caveats, questions, so on and so forth that you might encounter along the way. So Mike, feel free to start, and we will learn more about XDR. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys' time. Like Jeff said, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop, unmute yourself, and go ahead and ask, interrupt me. I don't care. I like to keep this informal. So I'm just going to do a quick PowerPoint just covering what XDR is, and then we'll pop over into the console and show you around the console. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So we're covering what is XDR. XDR is, the official name is the cross-layer detection and response. I also look at it as kind of like an enhanced XDR or extended XDR. I mean EDR, sorry. Enhanced EDR and extended EDR. So it goes above and beyond basic endpoint detection and response. Now, what we've been hearing from security teams from all of the places, they need to, they want to reduce the mean time to detect. They want to reduce the mean time to respond. But security teams are overloaded with alerts. On average, many IT professionals report over 1 million security alerts a day. This could, depending upon the size of the environment, this could be even more than that or less than that. Many environments have multiple different products in different silos. Average place has well over 80 different security vendors across their enterprise monitoring different things. And each product has a perspective, and there isn't really any correlation or consolidated view to see the entire chain of events. Now, a lot of companies say the security analyst, the job is tough because there's a lot of silos of visibility. There is, for example, they might be using EDR to get detailed visibility for their endpoints. And then in a separate silo, they're looking at events in their network. And then for cloud workloads, if you do have anything up there, maybe it's a kind of a EDR type, you're using your EDR system, your tools, your EDR tools that you're using on your endpoints, you're using up in the cloud because that's kind of what's out there available. So there's really not much information up there that you can pull out, or it's off a separate world. And then if anything, there's nothing looking at your mail if you do have anything in your mail. Now we realize now with these silos, all these different silos are sending all this information to a SIEM if you have one, or you have to look at all these individual logs and try to tie all these events together and try to figure out what these alerts mean. Should I respond to this alert? Should I not respond to this alert? We also understand that attackers don't stay in silo. When they attack an environment, they're going to come in through the email, then start at the endpoint, and then propagate out to the network and attack your servers, or vice versa, depending upon what that attack is. So many attackers cover multiple different areas in your environment, and it's hard to piece everything together, understand what actually happened in the event. XDR breaks that down and kind of ties all of the different silos together, and instead of getting all these alerts and noise, it tells the story. It allows the SOC team to see what happened and when it occurred and where it started and what events are tied to what events, so they can link it together and shut it down quicker. XDR works with network, email, endpoints, and cloud protection products. The products, you know, let me get ahead of myself here. There. So I have to click. We're covering endpoints, so we're looking at we're getting endpoint workload telemetry, so files open, processes run. We're collecting netflow data on the network side. We're collecting metadata from external, internal emails. The security, then we apply security analytics to the data lake itself, and this allows us to detect with more correlated models. We can link sequence of minor events to discover an attack laying in let's see how we can link sequence of minor events to discover an actual bigger attack. So what looks like a low-level attack in your environment, say a suspicious email came in, it may be linked to something much bigger. And in the logs, it'll say low level, this is low priority, but when we link all of them together, this could be a much larger issue. XDR is not going to replace your SIM. It's going to work with your SIM because it's going to, instead of sending all these alerts, we're going to be sending a complete picture to your SIM of what happened. Now, on top of our XDR solution and all that stuff, we have a managed piece. This is where an analyst is actually going to be working with your team, looking at the events that are occurring in the XDR console and either providing you information on how to respond or helping you respond to an event. Now, you don't necessarily have to have all the pieces for XDR to work. XDR will work with individual pieces. So if you just have the endpoint side of the house, you can start with this and it'll give you a very good picture of what's going on in your endpoints. Has a machine been compromised? Was there any progression to another machine? For example, someone stolen credentials and RDPing to another machine, etc., or attempts to run a unusual process or something run on the system. Then we add in the email piece. Now, lately in the last year, we've discovered that well over 94% of malware comes in via email. This allows us to see who received the email, or was there a similar threat? Are there other compromised accounts sending internal emails? So say was Bob over in accounting, he got his system compromised and suddenly he's sending all these emails to other people within my environment. Or you received an email with a malicious link or a malicious attachment. How many users received it? How many users opened it? Now we can also look at the cloud workload containers. We get the high fidelity detections, either being in whether in the cloud or on-prem, we can detect these events and correlate these into a usable option that gives you a usable log that you can react to and understand what's going on in your environments. And then we throw in the network piece, which will give you the kind of we'll call it the blind, normal EDR only focuses on the endpoint. If we throw in the network, then we get the visibility of actual lateral movement across the network. We'll know how attackers are, are they trying to propagate through either using a worm or using a hacking tool or even using regular tools to drop files to admin shares or whatever, trying to move laterally across the network. That's what the network EDR is going to give you that visibility to. Now, are there any questions on the slide? Because I am not a fan of slides, so I'm kind of zip through that very quickly. So if there's any questions on the slides, feel free to ask now, and then I'll pop over here into the council.
I have none.
Doesn't look like there's any questions either. So, all right. All right, so here's the initial. This is the Workbench. This is your XDR console. This is kind of your where you go into to see all the events. Now, the very first thing that you're going to see at the very top here is your Workbench. this is kind of where you're going to spend most of your time. This is the events that have occurred in the environment that's generated. These are automated generated events that occurred based on the data sent up to the cloud. So we're going to click in here. You're going to see if you have events occurring in your environment very quickly. You can see how many events, what these events are, how many endpoints are impacted by this particular event, and how many potential users are also impacted. If there was any emails associated with it, or if there's any additional stuff associated with it, you could very quickly zero in on what events I need to address. Now, these are by default sorted by the score, and the scoring is based on the severity of the event, the number of events, and a few other things that are done in the background. It's kind of how they rate the score. So something that may seem nominal if just looking at the logs, but when we tie everything together, may raise that score up very quickly. Then a good example is, I have two examples of a remote execution over lateral movement. And these are the exact same events. However, the only real difference is it added an additional user in here. So as soon as, because I added a third user, which means it's propagating, it kind of raised the severity level up. Now, each event you can just drill into. You can get very quickly, you could drill down and see what's going on. This is kind of a busy one. But I can see all my users that are impacted. I can see all the IPs and computers that are impacted, any links that were impacted. Off to my left, I can get what the event is. So this was a PS exec execution. I can take a look at, if I wanted to know what the MITRE technique was, I can get some more information on here and click this link. If I wanted to know what part of the graph this is, I can click on it and it'll highlight the actual event that occurred. So if I wanted to see this one, I could, this file transfer over SMB, I can see which systems were actually involved in that particular event. I also have, you'll see the numbers here. These are additional objects that were discovered at the time. So additional, in this case, this happens to be additional IP addresses that the system, that were accessed at that time. Or in this case, this was additional internal systems that were also accessed, or something occurred on these systems at that time. Now you'll also notice here that I have these little icons here. These little icons show if there is an execution profile. So the system will attempt to do a root cause analysis on some of these events. So if you're familiar with EDR, where you're doing actual threat hunting or event hunting, or wanting to know what happened, this is kind of will automatically kick off some of these execution profiles. And if one exists, you can see very quickly which events and which where these events are. And simply by going over here, I guess I got to scroll down. There we go. I can right click on the events, and I can get, if I want some detailed information about the endpoint, very quickly, right click, I can get some detailed information about the endpoint, what the endpoint name is, who the user was active at the time, what the IP address, etc. I can copy this to the clipboard to do some additional searching, or I can isolate the endpoint. If this is a cloud-based SaaS solution, I can isolate the endpoint and isolate the endpoint to only to prevent any possible spread of whatever threat this is, and also to help me get the system cleaned up. Now, if I want to know what happened on the system, I can check the execution profile or the root cause analysis, and it'll give me a breakdown of what happened on that system during whatever this event was. As you can see, this gets very busy sometimes depending upon what's happening on the system. However, if I want to very quickly pop over to the event, I can go up here to the noteworthy object, click search, and it'll drop me right to the actual suspicious object that it's triggering on. And I can go backwards from here and dig into this a little further as necessary. By clicking on the object, I can get some additional information about where the object was executed from, how it was executed, what are the SHA values, hash values of the file, if there's any other artifacts associated with it. In this case, there aren't any additional artifacts. if I wanted to drop back, I can go back here to this process, this explorer.exe, and dig into this a little further and see if there's additional information here as well. What objects are related to it, if there are any. So there's appears to be a registry key associated with this and a couple other things. Now, I also have the ability to dig into this much deeper. I can actually break down the individual, if you want to take this to this level, and actually see everything that was running at the time when this event occurred. If there are any IPs, and this will also show you any network communications that occurred at the time. So what systems did it reach out to during this event? And were there any changes? Apparently there's a couple changes to the registry at this time.
So I have a question for you, Mike.
Yes.
You mentioned being able to isolate the endpoint. At what level of isolation do we have for our endpoints running this product?
When we isolate the endpoint, this is running Apex 1 SAS. We isolate the endpoint. It limits the network communication to the Apex 1 console and Apex Central.
Okay, so you can still do your
So we can
investigation and remediation.
Yep. So we would be able to do some additional investigation, additional remediation. If I actually skipped that part. Hang on a second.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I actually skipped a piece there.
Why do you think I pointed it out?
All right. So I have some additional capabilities. So I've already isolated the system. I can go ahead and add this file to the block list, which automatically will start blocking it across the corporation. If this file, and this is the key, is if the file is suspicious or unknown, it'll give you the option to collect the file. So you will go ahead and will be able to collect the file for either additional analysis or submission to like us for additional analysis and maybe identification of what the threat actually is. And this will create a task and go ahead and start collecting it. Now, in some cases, depending upon what it is, you will also have the option of terminating the process or killing the process, depending upon what that detection. In this case, I don't have that option because I don't remember why it didn't do that one on this one. So let me go here.
What kind of intelligence does it use to identify what's suspicious or not?
Intelligence, as in, what do we have in the background?
Yep.
All right. So we have a number of rules or things in the background that the system will look at the events and say, okay, this traffic looks like an X piece of malware, or this traffic, it looks suspicious. It's calling out to an unusual domain. It's this intelligence fed from our smart protection network. Pardon me. I lost my train of thought on that one.
Threat intelligence.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the threat intelligence is fed from our smart protection network and things that we've gathered over time from all our sensors around the world as well. But also, it's using our machine learning so it can understand, it's all these threats are kind of coming in, and it's looking at all this stuff and doing the analysis and trying to figure out what's unusual, what's new. Some of the indicators of something new is a file that we have never seen before, has some suspicious characteristics within the file, or it has some suspicious behaviors. Let's say the file is starting to open or create new processes on the system. That will trigger some of these events as well. All right. So, along with the, there we go. Along with the execution profile, so we know what happened on the workstation. If I have the network piece connected, I can take a look and see what happened on the network side of the house. So in this case, I do have a DDI monitoring the network traffic, so I'm able to capture what happened during that time when this event occurred. So I can go ahead and click on the analytics of the network. and see what's actually occurred on the network, or were there any additional events that occurred on the network with this particular endpoint. Did it reach out only to a specific domain? Did it try, was there any kind of indication of lateral movement? So in this case, I got a couple of indicators here of, I can see SMB transfers to other stations within my environment. I can also see an FTP download within this environment. I can narrow these searches down to these specific machines if I want. I can copy in this side, I can go ahead and copy to a clipboard if I want to do some additional research. If I want to go over here and do some additional digging on this side, I can click on, there we go, this particular IP and actually send this up to VirusTotal and actually do a query with VirusTotal. Does VirusTotal know anything about this particular IP? Who owns the domain? Or I can link it to Trend Micro Threat Connect and see if we have any additional information about this IP. Now, additionally, I can see all the transactions occurred, what IOCs were downloaded, so what file hashes were downloaded, what IPs or URLs were reached out at this time. And if I want to do some additional digging as well, I can click on any of these events and do what we call smart triage and do additional digging. So like for instance, this particular hash value, if I want to know what does VirusTotal know about it, I can pop over to VirusTotal. It'll go to open up VirusTotal and give me a good indicator of what if they've seen it and what other vendors are seeing on it. Same thing with the IPs, addresses, all this stuff. We can do additional digging if necessary. I can actually see also all the transactions that occurred on these events. And if I wanted to, I could play the actual events as they occurred from start to finish. And I can see the communications as has occurred on the timeline. Now I can also, if some graphs could get very busy, like seems to be very busy. If I wanted to, I can go ahead and narrow my scope down where I only want to look at a particular IP address. So I'm only going to pick one of my IPs. Whoops. Learn to type it, right? And I can apply it, and then I can narrow my search down just to this particular IP address, and I can see everything that's associated with just this IP address if I see a lot of additional events or a lot of additional noise. So it gives me a way to really narrow down my scope and see what's going on in the environment, or if I want to focus on a particular machine.
What pieces make up XDR? We mentioned email and endpoint. What do we have that's making up XDR?
XDR is made up of our endpoint, email, so endpoint Apex 1, email, which is Cloud App Security, network, which is going to be Deep Discovery Inspector, and then our server workloads or Cloud 1. Did I say that one right? Yeah, Cloud 1. They keep changing things on me.
Yeah. And do you need all four of those pieces for this to work, or can you piecemeal it?
We can piecemeal it. You do not need all four pieces for this to work. Most people start off with the endpoint side and get this, we'll get this information on the endpoint side, and then over time we'll be able to add like email and then network and things. Now this graph is kind of screwed up. I'm not quite sure why, but these were actual emails that came in through Cloud App Security. If you do have emails linked to it, you do have the ability to quarantine the message immediately, and it'll quarantine that message or delete it across the environment for you. So you do have some abilities to clean up your email if a threat came in via email. Now, I'm not quite sure why these are off in their little realm. I'm going to have the support check that one. That's a new one. Also, like I said before with the root cause analysis, we do have the ability to collect. The collect option will show up if this is an unknown file or something that's suspicious or not, has a suspicious or unknown. So if it's a known detection, we're not going to be able to collect the file. Now, the parameters for collecting the file, obviously, it has to be still on the system for it to work successfully. So if the file gets deleted or something happens to the file, the collection will fail. But that's when you see the collect is when it's a new or suspicious object that has not been seen before. All right. Before I move on, are there any questions related to the Workbench? Anything else anybody would like to see about the Workbench? I'll take that as a no. All right. So one other thing, you do have the ability to, if you do want to narrow down, say you get a whole bunch of events in here and you only want to focus on certain things, you do have the ability to narrow it down. So you can do all of them or last 24 hours, or you can look for a specific model depending upon what you're interested in at this time. So if you only want to focus on the credential dumping, you can click on, that was a bad one. You want to focus on the credential dumping, you can just focus on that model and get those cleared out. Now, as you're working on these as well, you do have the ability to, so if you have multiple analysts looking at this, or you're working on multiple things and you want to keep track of what you're doing, you do have the ability to change the status of it. So everything that's new comes in, automatically gets that new flag. Once you start working on it, you can put new in progress, and that'll let others know that someone is working on this now, and they don't need to do anything with it, or if it's been closed, or closed if it's a false positive. So you do have some kind of auditing, or if you want a trail so people can keep track of what's going on in the environment.
So I saw the 7 days. Is that the most we can store?
No. The system will store up to 90 days. Sorry, I had to think about that one for a second. It will store up to 90 days worth of data.
Okay, so I could do historical research and investigation on 90 days worth of data.
Yes. Now, the workbenches, you're only going to be able to go the last 7 days. Well, no, you can do it all because this has... Nope. Yeah, so I can go back up to 90 days on the workbenches as well. They just don't have the filter for where you can customize the time range on it. But that actually is changing. There is going to be a new workbench coming out soon, or an updated workbench that's going to have some additional filters. All right, so let's see. Are there any questions on the workbench before I move on?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, so on top of the workbenches, these are automatically generated things that occurred in your environment. You also have the ability to do what we call threat hunting. So you received an alert saying, hey, I saw this strange IP from your network team. So this network team says, this IP address showed up in my environment. Or your email team said, I got this, a bunch of people who received notice that this people received an email with some strange subject or some strange name or attachment. I want to know how many people received it or whatever. I can go ahead and actually do these searches here. Now I can do a search for across the board for everything. So when I'm doing a search across for everything that's been registered, I have the ability to search for file name. I can do file hashes. I can do URLs, fully qualified names, or specific IPs. So I'll just use contains, and I'll just type, whoops. That's awesome. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. So someone said, I received an email with the attachment that had something trend X something. I don't know the rest of it, but this is what I know about it. So we can do a quick search on the attachment. So we know it contains this. We know received it in the last 24 hours. I can go ahead and do a search. And it's going to start saying, okay, so how many endpoints had this? How many endpoints did I detect? And so right now I currently have one endpoint with that detection. And I can actually see the files that were on the system and where they existed and where they were executed from. I can see that I had 4 network detections on this as well. And I can see which hosts which host it was going out to, or what my source file is, what my, this came all from the domain. So this was downloaded from a web page. I can see where this, what rule, what source it came from, etc. I can also see that 3 emails. I have activity on 3 emails that came in with that particular attachment or that particular name in there. I can see the file name if there is a file name. If I wanted to know who it came from or who it went to. So in this case, this particular only had 1 user that received it. If I had multiple users, we'd see multiple users in there. Then I can also see the source of who sent it from here as well. Now I have the ability to, in here, if I wanted to, let me find one. I can go ahead and kick off a quarantine. I can quarantine the message. I can delete it. So, or I can tell it, hey, can we do some additional digging here as well? Find out what else came in from that user, if anything else came in from that user. Now, I also have the ability to, so if I want to just narrow my search down, so if I take out email and I want to focus on just email, I have some additional things that I can do on each individual one. So in this case, with email, I had the ability to look up a file shell if I know it. If I have the URL that was in the email, I can look up that URL. If I know the person's mailbox, so if there's a mailbox that I want to do some digging on, what did that user receive, I can do some digging as well. Same thing for endpoint network. I get some additional functionalities when I separate these out. So with network, you see I have a whole plethora of things that I can look up if I have that information or I want to do some additional digging. So if I know what the rule that was stripped, so say I know that the rule name was executable file was dropped to an admin share, I can type and look up that rule. Or if I know the IP address of the system, I can look that stuff up. So it kind of gives you a very nice console to do IOC or threat hunting as well. The same thing with the endpoint side. If I can click. Really? There we go. When I just do the endpoints, I can actually zero in on specific. It just didn't update. That's awesome. Gotta love it when the console doesn't work. There we go.
You have an alert up in the corner too.
Yeah, that would be my file collect. I was going to get to that here in a second. So let's see if this actually works now. There we go. All right, that's better. So on the endpoint side, you know, I can look up actual usernames. So if I know what the username is or what the user name contained, I can look up information about that user. If I know the destination that the URL, the destination URL that the endpoint reached out to, I can search on that, or even file hashes. So I have the ability to do some really in-depth threat hunting on this. I can also see a history of all my previous searches. If I wanted to save, I don't have any of those. If I wanted to save the queries, I can create custom queries that I've used in the past and I want to save them. I can go ahead and save them. And these queries I can just pull up again very quickly if I want to reuse those queries at any time down the road. Now up here on top, you'll see the, you do have an informational. This will tell you, like I kicked off that file collect. In this case, this was told me that it was a successful file collection. I can pop over here, take a look at it, and be able to download the file. There it is. I'll be able to download this file and submit it as necessary. Or if there was a failure, I can find out why did it fail. Maybe the file was deleted or something happened to the file where it couldn't download it. Your alert section will give you information about, hey, what's going on with the system. Are there any errors? Are there anything that you need to do? If you're trying to register a new product, it'll also alert you of saying, hey, you don't quite got it set up right, or you need to do this. All right, so any questions on searches?
I have a couple. So you went through how to build your own query on looking for stuff. Does it support anything along the lines of Yara or IOCs?
Yara, no. IOCs, if you no, not we cannot import IOCs at this time.
Okay. Is that
So
something that's coming?
that is something that is being discussed. Yara at this time is not.
Okay. There's a question in the chat. Jithan has asked, when you quarantine a mail from an XDR portal, does the end user receive any notification?
That's dependent upon how your CAS is set up.
Okay. So if it is set up to alert, they will receive alert if you've quarantined an email.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Because all we're doing is telling CAS to quarantine the email, and then whatever rules and policies you have set in CAS will fly from that point. All right. Okay. So here we go. All right. So on top, now we've done searches, we've done the workbenches. Now you have the ability, as you add products to it or take products away, whatever, you have the ability to tune this, and also you can enable or disable rules. Now there are some rules by default will be turned off. So you have the option of turning things on, and most of the informational type or low risk alerts may be turned off by default. And you have the ability to go ahead and turn them on. Or if there's something that you just don't want to occur in your environment, say like this threat intelligence sweeping, you don't really want an automated system doing this in your environment, you can go ahead and pop over here and turn this off and disable this rule, and this will stop that process from happening. So you kind of can tune it to fit your needs. You also have the ability, as you see, there's many, many different products here. We can actually focus on specific products if we want to. So say I only want to look at my rules for deep discovery. So once I click this, this is going to filter out all the additional rules and only give me the rules for deep discovery, so I can see what's enabled, disabled very quickly, or I can look at all the products. Now, everything that you've done, any files that you've collected, anytime you've initiated a block this file or delete this message, will show up in the response management. This is kind of a log of things that you've done. So I have the ability to see what's going on in my mind, who's done what, when, where, and how. If there are files to be collected, this is where I'm going to collect them. If I accidentally happen to block a file or delete an email, I can go in here and tell it to go ahead and undo that message as well. I will not delete the message, but if I quarantine a message, I can unquarantine it. If I, same thing with block an IP address or something, I have the ability to undo what I've also initiated as well from this console. Now, so now when we're connecting products, like I said, the XDR console currently will support Cloud App Security. So that's going to be your email side of the house. It supports Apex One, which is your endpoint side of the house, and Deep Discovery for networking, and then the Cloud One or Deep Security piece for the network, the workloads, server side of the house. So there are some things you need to be aware of when you're making connections in here. So when you're connecting Cloud App Security, you're going to get the license and you're going to see it show up in here. And once it's in here, there's some things you have to do on the Cloud App Security Council, the CAS Council, to make sure that the connectivity is working properly. The first thing is you need to go over here to, once you get this license in there, you need to go into the automation integration APIs, and create an API key basically. So you're going to add a new one, and you just click on add and you select what you want to add. And in this case, we're going to add the XDR CAS. And then once XDR CAS, you're going to see all these options in here. Now, when you first go in here, these are going to be red X's. You need to go ahead and click on both of these to get these to basically authorize allowing CAS to integrate directly with O365, and you give it the authentication, the appropriate credentials so it can have access to it. Now, once that's done, these two checks should be green. and you should see a green check here. Once you have a green check here, you can pop back over to the XDR console, and this should say connected. If it isn't connected, you can do a refresh, and it may take, I ran into a situation where it took about 15, 20 minutes for it to actually sync up and actually give me a successful connection. Apex One as a service, that one is actually pretty straightforward. Once you get it registered, it kind of, I didn't really have to do much of anything as far as any special settings. Jeff, did you do anything on yours? Mine just kind of connected. Yeah, mine just kind of, Apex One just kind of connects to it, and as long as you get the license in there, it'll actually add itself to the console, and works pretty good on that aspect of it. Now, the deep discovery, there are a few steps that you do have to do to get this going first. The first thing is, when you deploy a deep discovery inspector, you need to have a deep discovery director in place. So either you need to do an on-prem or what we refer to as a cloud version. If you go to the cloud version, it'll deploy you deploy a cloud version of the deep discovery director. And then once that's deployed, that will take about 15, 20 minutes to fully deploy and be available. Once you're there, you have to create and I should have disconnected and redid this, and I didn't, but there's an option where it's going to create a API key that you have to use, or a key that you have to use to basically authenticate it or authorize it, the DDI, to connect to it and communicate with it. And the key, when you activate it, will be available for, was 24 hours when I did this one. So the key was available for 24 hours and then it expired. Now, once it's connected, it'll stay connected and continue to communicate till you hit disconnect. Are there any questions on that piece? Anything else on the connection?
I have none. Anyone else? What other types of connections can you set up besides, is it just to Trend Micro Endpoint Cloud App Deep Discovery server, or are there any other types of connections you can set up?
Right now, it's only Cloud App, Apex One, Deep Discovery, and Cloud Workload.
Okay. How about for SIM solutions?
We can integrate with a SIM. Let me find the right spot. Product, no. I'll provide it to the right one.
Hey, Mike, I'll kind of ask on that too. So if we can do, if you can do a SIM integration, why not just a SIM? Why would I need XDR?
The reason why we XDR is going to give you the correlated data. It's not just going to, where a SIM, you send all the logs and then you have to create the rules, you have to know what you're looking for, and you have all these events to look through and sort through. XDR actually will send the full event from start to finish. So a user received an email, opened an email, and the system reached out to X URL and downloaded this malware or something like that. Instead of having an event saying, yep, X user sent an email, and then 10 minutes later he opened up this, downloaded this attachment. These are going to be separate events in your SIM. XDR is going to tie those together and send that full event to the SIM versus each individual event. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
So yeah, we currently do have an integration with Splunk. There are other ways to connect other SIMs, but Splunk is the one that they do have a direct integration and an add-on for. And I don't have a Splunk instance to walk you through this, so this guide right here is actually a very easy guide as far as walking you through step by step getting it connected to a SIM. So yes, you can offload everything to a SIM. Now you also do have the ability to send notifications to emails. So say if you have a help desk or a SOC email distribution group where you want to be alerted of when events occur, XDR will send out alert events for every workbench that's created. And in this case, it's sending out to this email address. And then you can get a very quick, okay, this is what happened. These are the events that occurred. This is how many users that are impacted. These are how many endpoints are impacted. So you very quickly, and if you have an automated system that'll create tickets for you, same thing. You can send that to that system and it'll create that ticket for you if you have such a system that exists. So you do have that ability. This will also support, whoops, different accounts. So if you have multiple admins that you want to create an account for, you can go ahead and create multiple accounts. You can make them different levels. So we currently do have, we can give them only access to the console. We can give them access only to the API. So if you got a bunch of guys who likes to do code and needs API access, or you have a product that needs API access, you can give that account API access, or you can do both. We also have multiple roles. You have the master administrator, which is the master account that has control over everything. The administrator, which is just has not full control, so they can't, there's some things that they can and cannot do as an administrator. Then you just have senior analysts who don't have the ability to make settings changes and can look at different things. So you kind of set up your roles and decide who gets access to what.
Quick question in the chat for you.
Yep.
Support integration with any ticketing tools like ServiceNow.
If it'll receive an email, you can integrate that way, but there is no direct integration.
Other than APIs?
Other than APIs.
Okay, thank you.
Now, if you want a quick description of what each one of these roles are, if you go under roles, you can pop over here and actually see what level they have access to and what they can do. And then you can actually see how many roles are actually distributed. So you get a kind of a quick level. Okay, how many admin, senior analysts do I have, et cetera, if you want to know what these roles are. Is alert notification. Okay. Now, for those of us who wants to have the audits of knowing, hey, what are my analysts doing? What has been done? There is an audit log that is basically records everything that's gone on in the council, from logins to who's did what, when, where, and how. So there is a full audit log. So if there is a compliance reason where you need to pull up these logs, you can pull that up. So you have the ability to track what users are doing what. And then the remote support, basically this, with this enabled, allows our support engineers access to your console to debug or troubleshoot if there is an issue. And then if you go down the manage route, it's simply is enabling, you would enable this service here, and this will allow our managed XDR folks to have access to your console. Now, well, finally, there is some threat intelligence. So these are kind of, most of these are coming from our security blogs, but this is updated pretty much every day. So as new blogs are created, you can see them dropped in here, and you can do some reading up if you want to see what's going on or what we're seeing. We'll be posting that information in here. If there is something particular that you want to look up, say there is, do we have any information on X particular event or anything related to how this type shall? So if there's anything related to shell scripts or anything, I could go ahead and do a quick search and narrow down my what's available and do some additional reading if I need to do some research or I want to learn a little bit more about what's going on. All right, so that's kind of XDR very quickly in a high level. Are there any questions? Anything else that anybody want to look at?
Feel free. Don't be shy. What are some future plans for this? Anything you can share of what might be coming relatively soon?
What is coming soon?
That you can share.
Yeah, I'm pondering that real quick. On-prem Apex One support will be available at the end of this in the next month. I think that's pretty much what I can. Oh, there is going to be and actually I can share this. This is, I think that's what it is. They are actually updating our search capabilities. So there is coming down the road, probably within the next month, an enhanced search capability that's going to give you a little bit more granularity in your searching and threat hunting. This is planned for, trying to think what they told us. I want to say at the end of this month, beginning November, what their plan is.
And date slide for product management stuff, we know.
Yep.
All right. Any other attendees have any questions? Anything you want to maybe dive down into, look at a little bit more in depth? Please feel free. We have the time.
Hey, Mike, what if I wanted to take this out for a test run? What exactly do I need to do?
To test run it, basically talk to your sales rep or SE and get a trial license, and we can get you spun up very quickly.
But do I already need the products in place to test any of this, or can I do like a trial of those as well?
You can do a trial of those as well.
Perfect. I'm trying to think anything else I can think of. Alex, Jithan, any questions? Don't be shy. Mr. Westfall, how about you? You got any questions? Everyone's silent.
Either I bored everybody to death or...
Yeah. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. How about any plans on opening up the data lake? Access to it for other third-party vendors or integrations like that?
There are plans for integration to third parties, but I do not have the timeline nor the products that they are currently working on. So there are plans to start pulling in data from third parties, yes.
So you're saying pull in data. What about sharing that data?
Sharing the data, well, it depends upon how we're talking about how we're talking about sharing that threat data. Are we talking about setting up like a taxi server or a stick server and sharing that data out? I don't know if there's going to be any plans for sharing that data out, but I would have to double check on that one.
Scott, did you have a question?
I don't.
Okay. Oh, wait, there's a question in the Q&A. Please hold. Oh, okay. No, just insane. Just nice session. No questions asked. No questions necessary. Thank you very much. And again, like Mike said, if you guys have any questions or you want to see anything more in depth about any of the products involved or how it would react in your environment, i.e. through a proof of concept or trial, please definitely reach out to your SE or account manager, and we can see about getting those things set up for you. If there is nothing else, I guess we'll give you a half hour back. We'd schedule this for 90 minutes, but I guess we didn't need 90 minutes. So if there's nothing else, thank you very much for attending. Please share the Trend Micro Meetup, user group meetup with your other colleagues. We can help grow our meetings. And hopefully at some point in time in the near future, we'll be able to meet face to face. God willing. So other than that, everyone be safe, wash your hands, and we'll see you all at the next meeting. Keep an eye out on the Meetup website for the next announcement.
Thank
you.